This podcast is recorded on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people.
British Columbia, I've seen your mountains high, seen your pretty rainbows and your blue crystal skies, watched your winding rivers as they flow around the bend. To me you're not a stranger, you'll always be a friend.
Coming to you from the West Coast, this is Blood Toast. Today is October 5th, 2019, and this is episode 158A. We're bringing you this kind of emergency pod / update episode because a lot has happened between when we recorded and we actually released episode 158. So this will get you all caught up on that. Blood Toast is the BC Politics podcast. Tell us what you think of the show by leaving us a review or get at us on social media. Thank you to our patrons for your support. Your generosity makes this show possible. Help us build the show by throwing us a couple bucks a month at patreon.com/playtoast and by recommending the podcast to a friend. I'm Scott Deluneboom, and I'll be taking this one solo today. On today's show, Jinny Sim, the Minister for Citizen Services, resigns, as well as the Tories drop their candidate in Burnaby-North Seymour. Playtoast in partnership with BC Today, British Columbia's daily newsletter dedicated exclusively to BC politics. Sign up for a free trial to have unique coverage of the BC legislature delivered to your inbox every morning. Listeners to Playtoast offer the enter code CITIZEN, all lowercase, for access to a special rate. For your free 2-week trial of the newsletter, go to britishcolumbiatoday.ca. So first up, the big news that dropped last night is the resignation of Minister of Citizen Services Jinny Sim from Cabinet. It was revealed at the same time that a special prosecutor has been appointed and that the RCMP are investigating. John Horgan was advised of this by David Eby on Friday. Resignation announcement promptly followed. At this moment, we actually don't know what the allegations are. There's been a bunch of speculation, but it's a little hard to say because this is still very early days, and most investigations tend to be pretty tight-lipped and don't actually go into a lot of details until they progress a lot further than this. What we do know is that Selina Robinson, Minister for Municipal Affairs and Housing, will be filling in temporarily. So as said, we don't really know a lot about this at this time. Jinny Sims released a statement Friday saying she doesn't know what the specifics of the allegations are. It's hard to say if that is or is not the case, but that's what's out there right now. What we do know is that this isn't the first time she has drawn a lot of controversy or there's been issues raised around conduct. Back in May, there was a series of complaints about Minister Sim writing visa letters in her role as a MLA. That's a fairly common thing to help people get visas with the Canadian government for travel here. The issue was that several of the people she was writing letters for were Pakistani citizens on a security watch list, which raised quite a few eyebrows. At that time, the Liberals had received this information, and House Leader Mary Polak announced that she'd forwarded this information to the RCMP. So that's likely, or at least one of the more likelier options, that this is a result of that. But we still don't have very much information at this time, so it's a little hard to say. There's also a previous series of criticisms directed towards Jinny Sim around handling of personal email for government business, potentially to get around the Freedom of Information laws. That, I think, is a lot less likely to be the source of this, as it generally wouldn't fall under a criminal issue, as well as being just the case that it was quite a while ago, back when this government was new, and we haven't seen much development on that since then. This is most likely related to the visa letters, if it is related to a past issue that's arisen. Alternatively, this could be something else entirely, and we really don't know at this point, which just makes kind of breaking down what the implications are going to be a bit more challenging because, like I said, it's early days. That said, we can say a few things about this. First of all, as we discussed on the main episode with Shannon Waters, that the House will be resuming starting Monday, and this potentially throws the government off script for what should be a fairly easy, start of session. So that harms them politically a bit. It's going to be harder to say if that's going to have more of a impact outside of the Victoria bubble or not, or if it's just going to be something that doesn't really generate a lot of attention. in terms of how the session goes. It means that there will likely be a cabinet shuffle sometime soon. Selena Robinson will probably go back to her current role and cease filling the temporary role, and a new person will be appointed. Hard to say at this point who that would be. But I think more interestingly, Sim right now is only resigned as a cabinet minister. She's still a member of the House, but depending on what the allegations are and what we learn about them, it could potentially trigger a by-election if she is forced to resign, or it could set the stage for an early election, depending on how the NDP decide to play this. I've heard speculation that, given that there's some potential economic storm clouds on the horizon, that they may want to call an election earlier rather than later and potentially be running for re-election in the middle of a recession. So they may decide with these two things together just to peel off the Band-Aid and go for it earlier. Alternatively, they could just hold a by-election, probably at some point where the government isn't sitting, just to make the math that is very tenuous work out, and so it doesn't trigger any confidence votes, and they can still pass their legislation. So potentially when the House is on a break, say just after Christmas, similar to what happened when the Nanaimo by-election was last year to fill Leonard Crowe's seat. Sim in 2017 ran her riding of Surrey Panorama by 51 to the Liberals 42. So that's a comfortable amount, but not so much that, no incumbency advantage, that the Liberals couldn't make a play for it. And that could potentially also then spiral into a new election, just because the House math changes significantly if they do manage to pick up the seat. But this is all speculation. It's really hard to say, and we'll just be keeping an eye out on what happens to this going forward. The other big news that broke on Friday was that the Conservative Party has let their candidate go in Burnaby-North Seymour. Heather Leon was their candidate in there, but a series of rather controversial statements have come out, and as a result, the Conservative Party has decided to disassociate themselves with her. Specifically, there were comments from 2016 where she endorsed conversion therapy because, in her words, it provides hope to those living a, quote, perverted lifestyle, which is obviously very offensive and rightly so drew a lot of ire. Additionally, there's also a 2011 video that was actually shot by Burnaby Now, the local media, when they were covering the passage of a gay and transgender positive school board policy aimed at stopping bullying in Burnaby. She was out there protesting that and spoke quite a bit about, quote, homosexuals recruiting kids. So as a result of these bigoted statements, the Conservative Party has announced they'll no longer be supporting her. The wrinkle in this is that Elections Canada only allows candidates to withdraw before 5 p.m. 21 days before the election, which has passed, meaning she'll still be on the ballot, but will be getting no support from the Conservatives, or the Conservative Party. Voters may still end up voting for her. If she manages to somehow win, there's in theory nothing to stop the Conservatives from welcoming her into their caucus, but she'll probably end up sitting as an independent in the House. And this is quite interesting because it's actually a very close race in Burnaby South. It's widely seen as being a three-way race between Liberals, Conservatives, and NDP, with incumbent Terry Beach having quite a tough re-election campaign. So how Beach does from this is going to be interesting to watch. It's Burnaby-North Seymour is where the pipeline ends, so the Liberals' decision to buy it's obviously hurt him in the riding and made it quite a close race, as well as Sven Robinson, a prominent former member of Parliament, is running for the NDP again. So that's provide quite an interesting dynamic race there. And this potentially could shift this because without a formal Conservative candidate, the kind of Liberal Conservative swing voters will pretty safely park their votes with Terry Beach. Alternatively, a bunch will probably also just end up staying home, but he could potentially draw in quite a few voters who want to keep the NDP out. But the flip side of that is, with no Conservative candidate, there's also no incentive for the people who are on the fence between the Liberals and the NDP to stick with the Liberals in order to keep the Conservatives out, so he could potentially have his left flank disintegrate on him and go over to the NDP. So it's going to be really interesting to see how those two factors play out and what the ultimate impact of the race is going to be. As well, it may end up giving the People's Party a boost because there's no conservative candidate there, but going to be really hard to say if that's actually going to happen. I think there's a pretty strong feeling that the Conservative Party needs to stick together, not fracture, which will, I think, probably manifest as a lot of people staying home who would have normally voted Conservative rather than parking their votes elsewhere. But how that turns out remains to be seen. So these are two stories that we're going to be keeping a fairly close eye on going forward. Potentially huge impacts from both of them. With such a tight balance of power in the House here in BC, any impact to the governing confidence and supply agreement, any of their members, has potentially significant impact. So we'll be watching that closely as well. Generally, RCMP don't get called in for ministers unless something serious is going on. So there's going to be a lot to watch there. As well, in Burnaby-North Seymour, how this plays out could be quite impactful because the outcome of the election is widely expected to be a minority government, which means any small swing can have some fairly significant impact in terms of what the balance of power in a minority situation is, as well as this, in some ways, is acting as a referendum on the pipeline, at least locally. The impact of that's going to be interesting to see as it unfolds. So, of course, we'll keep you posted on these as they develop going forward. And I have a feeling, at least with the Jinny Sim stuff, we'll be talking about this one for quite a while. And that has been Politicast. Find links to everything we talked about at politicast.ca. If you're a first-time listener, make sure to subscribe and let us know what you think. Support the show and get access to our exclusive Slack channel at patreon.com/politicast. And if you have ideas for the show, feel free to send them to us. Our intro music credit is Beautiful British Columbia by Sergei Plotnikov. Thanks for listening.